The harmattan winds swept through the village of Olumba like whispers from the ancient ones. Dust danced in golden spirals as the sun dipped low behind the baobab trees, painting the sky in shades of amber and deep purple. It was Christmas Eve, a time when other villages celebrated with drums, roasted yams, and palm wine flowing like rivers. But Olumba was silent. Zuri sat outside her grandmother's mud hut, her small hands folded in her lap. She was only 12 years old, but her eyes carried the weight of someone much older. Her faded dress, once bright yellow, now hung loose on her thin frame. The fabric had been patched so many times it looked like a map of sorrows. "Grandmother," she called softly, her voice barely louder than the evening breeze. "Will we have anything for Christmas tomorrow?" Inside the dark hut, old Mama Kemi coughed, a deep, rattling sound that shook her frail body. She emerged slowly, leaning heavily on her walking stick carved from ironwood. Her white hair was wrapped in a worn headscarf, and her face bore the lines of 70 hard years. "Child," Mama Kemi said, settling beside Zuri on the woven mat, "we have what matters most. We have each other." But Zuri's stomach twisted with hunger. They had not eaten since the morning, and even that had been nothing more than cassava water and salt. The drought had been merciless this year. The crops failed. The river had shrunk to a muddy trickle. The other villagers, those who still had food, locked their doors and guarded their granaries with suspicious eyes. Zuri looked across the village square. Most of the huts stood empty now. Families had fled to the cities, searching for work, for mercy, for anything better than this slow starvation. Only the poorest remained, the ones with nowhere else to go. Old Papa Tun still lived 3 huts down, his legs too weak to travel. The widow Neka stayed because she had 6 children and no husband to lead them away. Young Kofi, the orphan boy, slept in the abandoned chief's house, surviving on wild berries and the kindness of strangers. "Grandmother," Zuri whispered, "why did the ancestors forget us?" Mama Kemi's eyes grew distant, reflecting the first stars appearing in the darkening sky. "The ancestors never forget, child. We forget them. We forget the old ways, the old prayers, the old respect." Thunder rumbled in the distance, though no clouds marred the clear evening sky. Zuri felt a chill run down her spine despite the warm air. The sound came again, not thunder, but something else. Something that made the earth beneath them tremble ever so slightly. "Do you hear that?" Zuri asked, gripping her grandmother's wrinkled hand. Mama Kemi nodded slowly, her expression unreadable. "They are waking." "Who is waking?" "Those who watch, those who remember, those who wait for us to remember them." The old woman stood with difficulty and shuffled back into the hut. She returned carrying something wrapped in ancient cloth, fabric so old it seemed ready to crumble at the slightest touch. Carefully, reverently, she unwrapped it to reveal a small wooden figure, no bigger than Zuri's palm. It was carved in the shape of a woman with her arms raised to the sky. "This," Mama Kemi said, "belonged to my grandmother's grandmother. It is older than memory. Tonight, on this holy night when the world celebrates birth and miracles, we will remember the old miracles too." "What do we do?" Zuri asked, her heart beating faster. "We pray. We call. We offer what we have. But we have nothing." Mama Kemi smiled, revealing gaps where teeth once were. "We have faith. We have need. We have respect. Sometimes, child, that is everything." As night fell completely, wrapping Olumba in darkness broken only by scattered firelight, Mama Kemi began to chant. The words were in the old language, the ancient tongue that few still spoke. Zuri did not understand the words, but she felt their power. They seemed to vibrate in her chest, in her bones, in the very ground beneath her. The wind picked up, stronger now, carrying with it the scent of rain, though no rain had fallen in months. The baobab trees creaked and swayed, their massive trunks groaning like old men waking from long sleep. And somewhere in the distance, deeper in the forest where no villager dared venture after dark, drums began to beat. Boom, 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 a rhythm as old as the earth itself. Zuri's eyes widened. "Grandmother, there's no one left in the village who plays the drums." Mama Kemi's chanting grew louder, more urgent. She placed the wooden figure on the ground between them and sprinkled it with the last precious drops of water from their clay pot. Water they should have drunk, water they desperately needed, but water she now gave as offering. The drums grew louder, closer, and then, at the edge of the village where the forest began, Zuri saw them. Lights, blue and gold and silver, floating through the trees like stars that had fallen from the sky and decided to walk the earth. They moved with purpose, with ancient grace, drawing nearer to the village with each passing moment. "Grandmother," Zuri breathed, fear and wonder mixing in her voice. "What are they?" Mama Kemi bowed her head, tears streaming down her weathered cheeks. "The ancestors. They heard us. After all this time, they heard us." The lights came closer, and Zuri could now see that they were not mere lights at all. They were figures, tall, majestic, shimmering with an otherworldly glow. Men and women dressed in robes that seemed woven from moonlight and mist, their faces noble and ageless, their eyes holding the wisdom of countless generations. They walked into the village square, and where their feet touched the dry earth, green grass sprouted. The air around them hummed with power, with life, with ancient magic that had slept but never died. The tallest figure, a woman with a crown of light around her head, stopped before Zuri and Mama Kemi. When she spoke, her voice was like wind through leaves, like water over stones, like the first word ever spoken. "You called daughters of Olumba. We have come." Zuri could not move. Fear rooted her to the spot like the ancient baobab trees that surrounded the village. The glowing figures stood before her, 7 of them now. She could count, each radiating power that made her skin tingle and her breath catch in her throat. Mama Kemi, however, showed no fear. She bowed low, her forehead nearly touching the dusty ground. "Great mothers, great fathers, we are honored beyond words. Forgive us for disturbing your rest." The crowned woman stepped closer, and Zuri could see her features more clearly now. She had the face of someone eternally young yet infinitely old, with eyes that held both kindness and judgment in equal measure. Her skin gleamed like polished ebony, and her robes shifted colors, now deep blue like the night sky, now rich gold like harvest grain, now green like the jungle after rain. "Rise, keeper of memory," the woman said to Mama Kemi. "You are one of the few who still remember the old ways. You honor us with your faithfulness." Mama Kemi struggled to her feet, and immediately one of the ancestral spirits, a tall man with a staff made of living wood, stepped forward and touched her shoulder. Strength seemed to flow from his hand into her body. The old woman stood straighter than Zuri had seen in years, her breathing suddenly easier, her movements less painful. "Thank you, honored one," Mama Kemi whispered. The crowned woman turned her gaze to Zuri, and the girl felt as though those ancient eyes could see straight into her soul, reading every thought, every fear, every secret hope she had ever harbored. "And you, child, what is your name?" "Zuri," she stammered. "Zuri of Olumba." "Zuri," the woman repeated as if tasting the name. "Beautiful one, how fitting. You have a pure heart. I can see it glowing within you like a small flame refusing to die even in the darkest night." By now, other villagers were emerging from their huts. Papa Tund hobbled out, leaning on his crutch, his mouth hanging open in disbelief. The widow Neka appeared with her children clustered around her like chicks around a hen, their eyes wide with wonder. Young Kofi crept forward, his ragged clothes and dirty face somehow seeming even more pitiful in the presence of such magnificence. The 7 ancestral spirits stood in a circle in the center of the village square. The crowned woman raised her arms, and the very air seemed to shimmer and change. Suddenly, the villagers found themselves no longer in the dusty, drought-stricken square they knew, but in a place of impossible beauty. Trees laden with fruits of every kind surrounded them. A clear river flowed nearby, its water sparkling like liquid diamonds. The sky above blazed with stars brighter than any they had ever seen, arranged in patterns that seemed to tell stories older than time itself. And in the distance, they could hear singing, voices so beautiful they brought tears to every listener's eyes. "What? Where are we?" Papa Tund gasped. "You are still in Olumba," the crowned woman answered. "But we have lifted the veil so you might see what was, what could be, and what should be. This is how your land once looked, before the forgetting, before the turning away." Another spirit spoke, a man with scars across his chest that glowed with soft light, warriors' marks from ancient battles. His voice was deep as thunder. "Your people abandoned the old covenants. They stopped giving thanks to the earth that fed them. They stopped pouring libations for those who came before. They stopped teaching children the sacred stories." "We forgot," Mama Kemi said, bowing her head in shame. "In our poverty, in our struggle, we forgot gratitude. We forgot honor. We forgot you." And so, a third spirit added, a woman with braided hair that seemed to move like living snakes. "The blessings withdrew. The rains ceased. The crops failed. The abundance turned to scarcity. Not as punishment, but as consequence. The old magic requires the old respect." Zuri found her voice, though it trembled. Can we bring it back? Can Olumba be green again?" The crowned woman smiled, and it was like the sun breaking through storm clouds. "That is why we have come, child. On this night, this holy night when both new faith and old faith speak of miracles, the door between worlds stands open. We heard your grandmother's prayer. We felt her offering, the water she gave though she herself was thirsty. Such sacrifice does not go unnoticed." She walked to the center of the circle of spirits and knelt down. With one finger, she drew symbols in the dirt, ancient signs that glowed golden as she traced them. "We offer you a gift, people of Olumba. But gifts from the ancestors always come with a test. Are you willing to be tested?" The villagers looked at each other nervously. It was young Kofi who stepped forward first, his chin raised despite his fear. "I am willing." "And I," said the widow Neka. "I as well," Papa Tund added. One by one, each villager spoke their willingness. Finally, all eyes turned to Zuri. The girl felt the weight of the moment pressing down on her shoulders. She thought of the hunger, the thirst, the hopelessness that had become their daily companions. She thought of her grandmother's failing health, of the children with swollen bellies, of the dried-up wells and cracked earth. "I am willing," Zuri said firmly. "Whatever the test, I will face it." The crowned woman nodded approvingly. "Then hear the terms. Tomorrow, on Christmas Day, each of you will be given a task. These tasks will be difficult. They will require sacrifice. They will demand that you give what you can least afford to lose. Complete these tasks with pure hearts, and Olumba will bloom again. Fail, and the drought will continue until the last person leaves and the village becomes dust and memory." The warrior spirit stepped forward, his scarred chest gleaming. "You must complete all tasks before the sun sets tomorrow. If even one person fails, all fail. Do you understand?" "We understand," Mama Kemi said, speaking for all of them. "Then rest tonight," the crowned woman said. "Gather your strength. For tomorrow, you will need courage you did not know you possessed." The beautiful vision began to fade. The fruit trees shimmered and vanished. The clear river dissolved like morning mist. The incredible stars dimmed back to their normal brightness. The villagers found themselves once more in the dusty square of drought-stricken Olumba. But the 7 ancestral spirits remained, standing like statues carved from light itself. "We will watch," the crowned woman said. "We will wait, and we will judge." Thunder rolled across the sky, real thunder this time, and with it came the first drops of rain in 6 long months. Just a few drops, barely enough to dampen the dust, but enough to kindle hope in desperate hearts. Zuri looked up at the night sky, feeling the precious drops on her face like blessings. Tomorrow would be Christmas. Tomorrow would be the test. Tomorrow would decide everything. She did not know if she was strong enough, but she would try. For her grandmother, for her village, for the ancestors who had not, after all, forgotten them. Christmas morning arrived with pink and orange clouds stretching across the sky like painter's strokes. Zuri woke to find her grandmother already outside, standing straight and tall, stronger than she had been in years, thanks to the ancestral blessing. The old woman was looking toward the east, where the sun was just beginning to rise. "They are coming," Mama Kemi said quietly. "Prepare yourself, child." The 7 spirits materialized as the first rays of sunlight touched the village. But now they appeared different, less overwhelming, more solid, as if they had taken on more earthly forms to walk among the living. The crowned woman approached, and behind her, 6 more spirits fanned out, each moving toward a different villager. "The time has come," the crowned woman announced, her voice carrying to every corner of Olumba. "Each of you will receive your task. Remember, pure hearts, true sacrifice, completion before sunset. These are the requirements." She turned first to Mama Kemi. "Keeper of memory, your task is this. You must go to the sacred grove beyond the forest and gather the healing herbs that grow there. These herbs will restore life to the land. But the grove is far, 3 hours' walk for young legs, impossible for one as old as you. Yet you must walk it yourself. No one may carry you. No one may help you. Reach the grove, gather the herbs, and return before sunset." Mama Kemi's face paled, but she nodded. "I will do it." The warrior spirit approached Papa Tund, whose crippled legs had not carried him beyond his hut in 5 years. "Old father, your task is to climb to the top of Ancestors' Hill and light a sacred fire there. The fire must burn until sunset. Only then will the rain clouds gather and break." Papa Tund looked at his twisted legs, then at the hill rising in the distance, steep, rocky, impossible. "How can I?" "That is for you to discover," the warrior said, not unkindly. "The ancestors do not give impossible tasks, only difficult ones." A spirit with gentle eyes approached the widow Neka and her 6 children. "Mother of many, you must prepare a feast, a Christmas feast worthy of celebration. But you must cook enough food for every person in this village and use only what you can find or grow today. You may take nothing from anyone's storehouse. You may accept no gifts. What you serve must come from your own hands and heart." Neka's children whimpered. They had no food, no seeds, nothing. But their mother squared her shoulders. "It will be done." To young Kofi, the spirit with braided hair said, "Orphan boy, you must rebuild the village shrine that has fallen into ruin. You must make it beautiful again, worthy of prayer and offerings. But you must use no modern tools, only your hands and stones and clay, and wood, as the ancient builders did." Kofi looked at his small, thin arms, but he nodded bravely. "I'll do my best." 2 other villagers received their tasks. The young hunter Jabari must track and bring back a white antelope, a creature not seen in these lands for 20 years, and old sister Falami must weave a ceremonial cloth using cotton she must first find and pick herself. Finally, the crowned woman stood before Zuri. The girl's heart pounded so hard she thought everyone must hear it. "Zuri, daughter of Olumba, your task is the most difficult of all." The girl swallowed hard. "What must I do?" "You must find the heart of the village." Silence fell. Zuri waited for more explanation, but none came. I don't understand. What is the heart of the village? Where do I look?" The crowned woman's expression remained serene but revealed nothing. "That is what you must discover. The heart of the village has been lost for many years. Some say it never existed. Some say it was stolen. Some say it was forgotten. But it is real and it is hidden and you must find it. Without it, even if all other tasks are completed, the restoration cannot be finished. But where do I start? What does it look like?" "It looks like what it is. You will know it when you see it if you see it. Search with more than your eyes, child. Search with your heart." Before Zuri could ask anything more, the crowned woman raised her hands. "The sun has risen. Your time begins now. Go, children of Olumba. Show us what lives in your spirits. Show us if you remember what it means to truly sacrifice, to truly strive, to truly believe." The spirits faded like smoke, though Zuri could still feel their presence, watching, waiting, judging. Immediately, the villagers scattered to their tasks. Mama Kemi began walking toward the forest, her steps slow but determined. Papa Tund stared at Ancestors' Hill, then began crawling toward it on his hands and knees, dragging his useless legs behind him. The widow Neka took her children's hands and led them toward the dried-up fields, hoping against hope to find something growing. Kofi ran to the ruined shrine and began gathering stones. Zuri stood alone in the square, turning in circles. The heart of the village. What could it mean? She thought of asking someone, but everyone was already consumed with their own impossible tasks. She thought of searching the abandoned chief's house. Perhaps it was something physical, an object of power. But something told her it was more complicated than that. The morning sun climbed higher, and Zuri felt panic rising in her chest. Every moment she stood still was a moment wasted. But rushing off blindly would waste time too. Think, she whispered to herself. The ancestors said search with your heart, not just your eyes. What does that mean? She closed her eyes and tried to feel rather than think. What was the heart of any place? What made a village truly alive, truly whole? People, she thought. But most people had left Olumba. Love, perhaps. But there was so much suffering here, so much loss. Memory, history, connection. Her eyes flew open. Of course. The ancestors themselves had called her grandmother keeper of memory. Memory was sacred to them. History was sacred. Connection to the past was sacred. The heart of the village wasn't a thing. It was a story. But which story? And where was it kept? Zuri's gaze swept across the village and landed on the oldest structure still standing. The meeting house, where councils once gathered, where elders once taught the young, where stories once echoed through the rafters. It had been abandoned for years, its roof partially collapsed, its walls crumbling. If the heart of the village was anywhere, it would be there. Zuri ran. The old meeting house loomed before Zuri like a dying giant. Vines had overtaken its walls, and sections of the thatched roof had caved in, letting shafts of sunlight pierce the dusty darkness within. The wooden door hung loose on broken hinges, creaking mournfully in the hot morning breeze. Zuri hesitated at the threshold. She had never been inside. Children were warned away from the unstable structure. But now she pushed the door open and stepped into the shadows. The air inside was thick and still, smelling of decay and forgotten things. Her eyes adjusted slowly to the dimness. The main room was large, with walls covered in faded paintings, ancient symbols and scenes of village life from long ago. Benches lay overturned. Clay pots lay shattered. In the center of the room stood a raised platform where the chief once sat in judgment and wisdom. Zuri walked carefully, her footsteps echoing. She searched the walls, the floor, behind the fallen benches. Nothing seemed special or significant, just debris and ruin. "Where are you?" she whispered to the emptiness. "Heart of the village, where are you?" No answer came except the rustle of wind through the holes in the roof. Hours passed. The sun climbed higher, its light growing harsh. Zuri could hear the sounds of the village through the broken walls, sounds of struggle, of effort, of people giving everything they had. She heard Papa Tund grunting with pain as he dragged himself up the rocky hillside, inch by agonizing inch. She heard Kofi singing softly to himself as he stacked stones with bleeding hands. She heard the widow Neka's children crying from hunger, even as their mother dug in the barren fields with her bare hands, searching desperately for anything edible. And somewhere far away, Mama Kemi walked through the forest alone, her old bones screaming with every step, but her determination unshaken. They were all suffering, all sacrificing, all hoping, and Zuri had found nothing. Despair crept into her heart like cold water rising. She had failed. She would fail them all. The village would die because she could not solve a riddle. She sank down on the dusty floor, tears streaming down her face. "I don't know what I'm looking for," she cried out. "I'm just a girl. I don't have ancient wisdom. I don't understand." Her voice echoed back to her mockingly from the empty walls. In her grief, she didn't notice at first that something had changed. The light had shifted. One particular shaft of sunlight, falling through a hole in the roof, now illuminated a section of the wall she hadn't examined closely before. Wiping her eyes, Zuri stood and walked toward it. There, partially hidden behind a fallen beam, was a painting different from the others. It showed a tree, an enormous baobab with roots spreading deep into the earth and branches reaching toward the heavens. And carved into the tree trunk, so small she had to squint to see it, was a symbol she recognized. It was the same symbol her grandmother had drawn in the dirt the night before, when calling the ancestors. Zuri's heart quickened. She pulled at the fallen beam with all her strength until it rolled away. Behind it, set into the wall itself, was a small alcove covered by a thin cloth so old it disintegrated at her touch. Inside the alcove sat a wooden box. With trembling hands, Zuri lifted it out. The box was beautifully carved with intricate patterns, trees and rivers, people dancing, drums and fires, the sun and moon and stars. It felt warm to the touch, as if something alive pulsed within it. She opened the lid. Inside was not gold or jewels or any precious object. Instead, there were scrolls, dozens of thin bark scrolls covered in writing. The old writing, the ancient script that few could read anymore. But even though Zuri couldn't read the words, she understood what they were. Stories. The stories of Olumba. The history of every family, every generation, every triumph and tragedy and lesson learned. The accumulated wisdom of centuries, carefully recorded and preserved. This was the heart of the village, its memory, its identity, its soul. Zuri clutched the box to her chest, feeling its warmth spread through her body. She had found it. The first surge of joy rushed through her. But then doubt crept in. Was this truly what the ancestors wanted? Was this the answer? There was only one way to find out. She had to bring it to the village square and wait for sunset with the others. Zuri emerged from the meeting house into the blazing afternoon sun. She looked around at her struggling neighbors and felt her heart clench with love and pride. Whatever happened, they were trying. They had not given up. She ran to the square and carefully placed the box on the ground in the center, where the ancestors had stood the night before. Then she looked at the sun's position. It was past midday now. They had perhaps 6 hours left. She couldn't just wait. If the others were sacrificing, she must too. Zuri spent the afternoon running between the struggling villagers, offering what little help was permitted. She brought water to Kofi as he worked on the shrine. She called encouragement to Papa Tund, who was now halfway up Ancestors' Hill, his hands bloody and torn. She helped the widow's children search for wild vegetables at the forest's edge. As the sun began its descent toward the western horizon, painting the sky in golds and crimsons, the villagers began returning to the square one by one. Mama Kemi arrived first, limping badly, her face gray with exhaustion. But in her arms she carried fresh green herbs, their leaves still sparkling with dew. She had done it. The widow Neka came next with her children, carrying clay pots filled with food, wild yams, palm nuts, mushrooms, and greens they had foraged. Somehow, miraculously, they had found enough to feed everyone. She had done it. Kofi appeared with dust and clay covering every inch of his body, but his eyes shone with pride. "The shrine is finished," he gasped. "It's beautiful. I promise it's beautiful." The hunter Jabari emerged from the forest, and draped across his shoulders was a white antelope, rare and magnificent, its coat gleaming like snow. "It came to me," he said in wonder. "I didn't have to hunt it. It walked right up to me, as if it wanted to be found." Sister Falami brought a cloth of woven cotton, rough but serviceable, its patterns showing traditional designs she had somehow remembered from childhood. Finally, as the sun touched the edge of the horizon, Papa Tund appeared at the base of Ancestors' Hill. Young Kofi and Jabari ran to help him, and though he could not walk, they carried him gently to the square. "The fire burns," he said weakly. "At the top of the hill. I lit it. I kept it burning." Everyone turned to look at the hilltop, and sure enough, a bright flame danced there, visible even in the fading daylight. They had all completed their tasks. All except, everyone looked at Zuri and the wooden box sitting in the center of the square. "Did you find it?" Mama Kemi asked, her voice barely a whisper. "Did you find the heart?" "I think so," Zuri said. "I found this. The old stories. The history of our people." The sun slipped lower. Minutes remained. and still the ancestors did not appear. The villagers stood in tense silence as the sun continued its relentless descent. Shadows grew long across the dusty square. The light turned from gold to deep orange to crimson. "Why don't they come?" the widow Neka whispered, clutching her youngest child close. "We did everything they asked." "Perhaps it wasn't enough," Papa Tund said grimly, his face still contorted with pain from his ordeal on the hill. Zuri stared at the wooden box, doubt gnawing at her heart. Maybe she had found the wrong thing. Maybe the real heart of the village was somewhere else, still hidden, and she had wasted the entire day searching in the wrong place. The sun touched the horizon, and then, with a sound like thunder and wind and drums all at once, the 7 ancestral spirits materialized in the square. They appeared suddenly, as if they had always been there and the villagers were only now able to see them. The crowned woman stepped forward, her expression unreadable. She walked slowly around the circle of exhausted, anxious villagers, examining each one carefully. She touched the herbs Mama Kemi had gathered, nodded at their potency. She tasted the food Neka had prepared, smiled at its flavor. She examined the white antelope, the woven cloth, and sent her gaze toward the hilltop where Papa Tund's fire still burned bright. "You have all done well," she said finally. "Each of you faced your impossible task and conquered it through determination, faith, and sacrifice. You have proven your worth." Relief flooded through the group, but the crowned woman raised her hand for silence. "However, the test is not yet complete." Every heart sank. The sun was nearly gone now, just a sliver of red fire on the horizon. The crowned woman approached Zuri and the wooden box. She knelt down and lifted the lid, gazing at the ancient scrolls within. For a long moment, she said nothing, just looked at the preserved stories with an expression that might have been sadness, or pride, or both. "You found the old stories," she said to Zuri. "The memories of Olumba, written and preserved by generations of scribes. This is indeed precious. This is indeed the memory of your people. Then it's the heart of the village?" Zuri asked hopefully. "It is part of the heart, but not all of it." Confusion rippled through the villagers. The warrior spirit stepped forward, his scarred chest gleaming in the last light. "The true heart of the village is not a thing that can be found. It is a thing that must be chosen." "I don't understand," Zuri said, frustration creeping into her voice. The crowned woman stood and faced them all. "Let me tell you what we have seen today. We have seen an old woman walk farther than her body should allow, driven by love for her people. We have seen a crippled man climb a mountain on hands that bled and knees that screamed, driven by duty to his community. We have seen a widow and her children find food where there was none, driven by hope and determination. We have seen an orphan create beauty from ruins, a hunter befriend the hunted, a weaver remember forgotten patterns." She paused, letting her words sink in. "And we have seen a young girl search tirelessly for something she did not understand, refusing to give up even when despair told her to stop. But that is not the full test." The sun was now just a thin line of fire on the horizon. Seconds remained. "The true test," the woman continued, "is this: you have all sacrificed greatly today. You are exhausted, hungry, hurt, and desperate. The food Neka gathered will barely feed you all one meal. The herbs Mama Kemi brought could heal many ailments and sell for much money in the city. The white antelope Jabari captured is rare beyond price. The cloth Falami wove took her entire day's labor." She looked at each of them in turn. "Now we ask, will you share these things freely with each other? Or will each of you keep what you have earned through your suffering?" The old woman could keep the herbs to heal herself. The widow could feed only her own children. The hunter could sell the antelope to feed himself for months. Each of you could take your reward and leave the others to their fate. The villagers looked at each other, understanding dawning on their faces. "That is the choice," the crowned woman said. "That is the true heart of the village. Not an object, not even a memory, but the decision to remain connected, to share, to sacrifice not once but continually, to choose community over self." The sun was a hair's breadth from disappearing completely. "Choose now," the woman commanded. "Share freely or take what is yours. Choose the heart of the village or choose yourself. The magic cannot work without your choice. The restoration cannot begin without your hearts truly united." For a moment, no one moved. The tension was unbearable. Then Mama Kemi stepped forward and placed her bundle of herbs in the center of the square, beside the wooden box. "These belong to Olumba," she said firmly. "Not to me." The widow Neka and her children brought their pots of food and set them down. "For all to share," Neka said. Jabari laid the white antelope down gently. "For the village." Sister Falami added her cloth. "For our people." Papa Tund, still unable to stand, pulled a small pouch from his belt, his only possession of value, a leather bag containing herbs he had been saving to trade for food. He tossed it into the pile. "I have little, but what I have is yours." Young Kofi had nothing physical to give, but he spoke up in his clear child's voice. "I rebuilt the shrine. It belongs to everyone. Anyone can pray there. Everyone is welcome." All eyes turned to Zuri. She looked down at the wooden box, the ancient stories, the preserved wisdom. It would be so easy to claim it as her discovery, her treasure, her salvation. But she understood now. She knelt and opened the box, taking out the scrolls one by one. "These stories belong to all of us," she said. "They are our shared history, our shared heart. And from this day forward, we will add to them. We will write new stories of how Olumba survived, how it shared, how it loved." The instant she spoke those words, the sun disappeared below the horizon. Darkness fell, and in that darkness, light exploded. The light came from everywhere and nowhere, from the ground beneath their feet, from the air around them, from the very hearts of the villagers themselves. Blue and gold and silver radiance swirled through Olumba like living water, touching everything, transforming everything. The 7 ancestral spirits grew brighter, more substantial, until they seemed almost solid enough to touch. The crowned woman raised her arms, and her voice rang out like a bell across the land. "The heart of the village beats once more." The light poured into the earth, and immediately green shoots began pushing up through the dust. Within seconds, they had become grass, soft and thick and impossibly green. The grass spread outward from the village square like ripples on a pond, covering the barren ground in a carpet of life. The dried wells began to gurgle and bubble. Water, clean, fresh, cold water, surged up from depths that had seemed empty forever. It overflowed the wells and formed streams that ran through the village, singing as they went. The fields beyond the village, those patches of cracked earth where nothing had grown for months, suddenly erupted with crops. Yam plants pushed through the soil and grew before the villagers' astonished eyes, swelling with healthy tubers. Cassava stalks shot upward. Palm trees straightened and burst forth with fresh nuts. Corn stalks grew tall and proud, their ears fat and golden. The baobab trees around the village, those ancient witnesses that had stood silent and suffering through the drought, seemed to sigh with relief. Their leaves unfurled, thick and green. Their branches spread wide, offering shade and shelter once more. And above it all, storm clouds gathered with impossible speed. Not the thin, cruel clouds that had taunted them for months, but heavy, dark, pregnant clouds full of blessing. Thunder rolled, and then the rain came. Not a drizzle, not a shower, a downpour, a deluge, a celebration of water falling from the sky in sheets, soaking into the thirsty earth, filling the rivers, washing away the dust and despair of the long dry season. The villagers stood in the square, their faces turned upward, letting the rain wash over them. Some laughed, some cried, some simply stood in stunned silence, unable to fully comprehend what they were witnessing. Mama Kemi fell to her knees, her arms raised to the sky, tears mixing with rainwater on her weathered face. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you, thank you, thank you." The crowned woman approached her and gently lifted her to her feet. "No, daughter. Thank you. You kept the faith when others abandoned it. You taught the child. You remembered us. Without you, this miracle would not have been possible." She turned to address all of them, her voice somehow clear even over the sound of pouring rain. People of Olumba, you have learned today what your ancestors knew long ago. A village is not its buildings. It is not its land or its wells or even its stories, though these things matter. A village is its people choosing to care for each other, again and again, even when it costs them everything. The warrior spirit stepped forward. You were tested not just on your ability to complete difficult tasks, but on your willingness to share the fruits of your labor. Many villages have failed this test. Many people, when pushed to their limits, choose self-preservation over community. But you chose differently. The spirit with the braided hair smiled warmly. And that choice, that repeated, daily, difficult choice to remain connected, to share, to sacrifice for each other, that is what creates true abundance. Not magic, not blessings from spirits, but human hearts that refuse to harden, that refuse to turn away, that refuse to say, I have nothing left to give. The rain began to ease to a gentle shower, and through the clouds, stars appeared. Beautiful, brilliant stars in patterns that seemed to form pictures and tell stories. Zuri looked around at her village, transformed in a single night from dying to thriving, and felt a joy so profound she thought her chest might burst. But more than the green fields and the flowing water, she saw the faces of her neighbors. Faces filled with hope and wonder and renewed strength. Will you stay with us? She asked the crowned woman. Will you help us rebuild? The woman shook her head gently. We will return to our place beyond the veil. But we are not far, Zuri. We never were. When you honor the earth, when you share your blessings, when you tell the old stories and create new ones, when you choose community over self, we are there. We are in those choices. We are in those actions. The 7 spirits began to fade, their forms growing translucent in the starlight. Wait! Zuri cried out. What if we forget again? What if we fail? The crowned woman's voice came from everywhere and nowhere, already distant. Then you will suffer again, and hopefully remember again. The cycle repeats until the lesson becomes permanent. But we believe in you, children of Olumba. Write your new stories. Teach your children. Share your abundance. Love each other, especially when it is difficult. And always remember, the warrior spirit's voice echoed, that the greatest poverty is not empty stomachs or dry wells, but hearts that refuse to give. The spirits vanished completely, leaving behind only the gentlest breeze and the smell of rain-soaked earth. For a moment, the villagers stood in silence. Then, spontaneously, they moved together. They embraced. They laughed and cried together. They began to sing old songs they had almost forgotten, songs of thanksgiving and celebration. The widow Neka opened her pots of food and began serving everyone. Mama Kemi crushed some of her herbs into the fresh water, creating a healing drink she shared freely. Jabari began preparing the white antelope to roast, enough meat for a true feast. Sister Falami draped her woven cloth over the shoulders of Papa Tund, who wept at the kindness. And Zuri took the ancient scrolls and began reading them aloud by firelight, sharing the stories of their ancestors with anyone who would listen. Young children gathered around her, their eyes wide, learning their history, connecting to their roots. As the night deepened and the fire crackled and the community shared food and stories and laughter, old Papa Tund spoke what everyone was feeling. This is the greatest Christmas gift we could have received. Not the rain or the crops, though we needed those desperately, but the reminder of who we are. The reminder that together, we can survive anything. Mama Kemi nodded, holding Zuri close. The ancestors did not save us today, she said wisely. They gave us the chance to save ourselves. They showed us that we still had the strength, the love, and the will to choose each other. That was always the magic. That was always the power. Zuri looked up at the stars, at the patterns that seemed to show her ancestors dancing and celebrating. She understood now. The heart of the village had never been lost. It had only been sleeping, waiting for people brave enough and generous enough to wake it up. Sparkles, the moral lesson. As the fire burned low and the feast ended and the people of Olumba prepared to sleep in their revived village, Mama Kemi gathered everyone one final time. She stood at the center of the square, her voice strong and clear. Let this Christmas be remembered forever in Olumba. Not as the day the ancestors came, though they did. Not as the day the rains returned, though they did. But as the day we remembered the most important truth. Community survives not by what it accumulates, but by what it shares. True wealth is not in possessing much, but in giving freely. The heart of any village, any family, any people beats strongest not when individuals succeed alone, but when they choose to lift each other up, again and again, even when it costs them everything. We were dying not because we were poor in things, but because we had become poor in spirit, too tired, too afraid, too desperate to look beyond ourselves. The ancestors tested us to see if that poverty was permanent or temporary. And we proved that even in our deepest need, we could still choose generosity over greed, community over isolation, love over fear. This is the lesson we will teach our children and our children's children. The greatest magic is not in spirits or blessings, but in human hearts that refuse to harden. The greatest power is not in taking, but in giving. And the greatest miracle is not a sudden change from suffering to abundance, but the daily decision to remain connected, to remain kind, to remain human, no matter how difficult life becomes. The people of Olumba nodded, committing these words to their hearts, to their memories, to the new stories they would add to the ancient scrolls. And as they finally dispersed to their homes, to sleep in a village transformed, on land that would feed them again, under skies that would water their crops, each person carried with them the knowledge that they had not merely received a miracle, they had created one. Together. May the heart of your village, whatever form it takes, beat strong and generous forever.